Welcome to another edition of Falmouth Cares Business Roundtable. I'm your host, Troy Clarkson, and as always, we're joined by our panel of local business leaders and experts, Bill Zammer from the Flying Bridge, Michael Kasparian from the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce, and our resident statistician, tech executive, Gary Bacon. This week, we're very pleased to have two guests to talk to us about the impact of this pandemic on our community, on the business community, and on the wider society of which we are all an important part. So we have today Dan Maxwell from Maxwell's and Bill Hough, the publisher of the Enterprise newspapers. And Bill will share his perspective not only as someone whose responsibility is to cover this pandemic, but as a small business owner as well, who's dealing with it on that very basic level. So as we did last week, what I'd like to do is start the show off really and toss it right to Gary to provide us with an update on some of the trends that we're seeing, some of the statistical impacts of the pandemic and how things are unfolding. This really gives us the factual basis for the continued social distancing and an opportunity to discuss and continue to pose that question, how will we adapt? And how will the business community reinvent itself on a regular basis once the social distancing requirements are relaxed? So Gary, as always, thank you for your continued research and participation, and please share with us some thoughts since the show last week.
Okay, thanks, Troy. I'm going to take the screen here. Do you all see that? I'm starting with the usual disclaimers. These are my sources, and understand, especially when we're talking about infection rates, we're dealing with very limited sampling sizes because of the testing that we're doing in this country. Only 2.16% of the population have been tested as of the numbers you want to see, which was the end of the day yesterday in the United States. And we're doing much better in Massachusetts. 4.56% of the population has been tested. These are not random samples, so statistical inference is a suspect. And forecasting based on infection rates is difficult. Here's a chart we run every week, which is the Corona growth factor. This is kind of, as long as your growth is above 1, 1.1 is 10%. We're into low single digits now. The blue line is the United States as a whole, and the orange kind of reddish line is Massachusetts. It's been creeping down, but it is not at 1, which is where we want to get. Here's a couple of charts we've been looking at weekly as well. This is the Massachusetts new daily cases by day. And it's very important when you look at this to also look at the number of tests that we're performing on that given day, because there's a lot of correlation. If you do more tests, you're going to find more infections. It is, I mean, you got if you kind of blurred your eyes, maybe you can see kind of a downward trend here that feels a little bit better than what we've seen in the past. Also note that there was a lot of testing done to support these numbers, so it makes those numbers more solid than if there wasn't. So that's kind of a glimmer of hope. It's not, we'd like to see this go down for a longer period of time, obviously, to make a policy decision, but that's what's been going on. And, I've continued to put up the University of Washington data every week. This is a forecast model. The forecast model is led by this guy, Chris Murray, who's chair of this operation at the University of Washington, funded by the Gates Foundation. These models, interestingly, are not based on infection rates because they thought that was too suspect. They actually work backwards from death rates, which is kind of a morbid way to do it. But kind of the thinking there is counting it's sadly counting people that are dead is something that you can probably do relatively accurately. And this is the Massachusetts version of that model, which has not changed very much over the last week. Last week, we were talking about sometime in the end of June, they're projecting that you could start to relax social distancing as long as you had contract testing and isolation and limited gathering size. And they've kind of stayed with that, and they're continuing to forecast that we'll stay underneath this purple line, at least with the mean case. Now, understand, this is the level of uncertainty in the model. Mm-hmm. So at least with the mean case, which is this dotted line, that we stay under the peak hospital utilization, which is kind of played out. And we're using kind of half the hospital beds in Massachusetts. Now I'm going to go to the Massachusetts Department of Public Health data. This is starting to get a little bit more hopeful as well. This is the total number of patients hospitalized, and it kind of peaked here, 3,900 or so, 39, almost 4,000, and we're down around 3,600. And you can see there's a little bit of net discharge from the hospital, and that's a good sign. Also, Massachusetts death rates have shown some indication of falling, and that's a good sign. And one other further good sign, which is what percentage of tests turned out to be positive. Early on, if you go back here, a full 33% of the tests were positive. You go out here, now it's looking like, I don't know, someplace in the high teens in terms of percentage rate of when we test somebody, what's the probability that they test positive, which is also a good sign. So there seems to be some trends that are getting a little bit better. It's very early, but they are getting a little bit better. And, you know, to try to interpret these trends, I thought I'd do something new this week and talk about maybe things that we might be able to learn by looking at the experiences of other states, and particularly states that have some parallels to what's going on here in some sense, or maybe ahead of us in terms of their curves. They started earlier. And I'll start with New York. The New York, this is kind of the infection rate in New York. It went up relatively quickly, but and if you've been watching Cuomo's briefings, it's dipped. It's taken longer to dip than, for instance, the University of Washington model thought initially. They've been trying to update their model, but this is kind of interesting. It's certainly going down, but it's not going down at the same rate it went up. It's not just kind of like a Gaussian. It's doing this. Some other data came out in New York in the last day or so, which is there's been a lot of speculation about herd immunity, which is how many people are infected or have experienced the infection. And this is kind of when you do the blood test and you figure out whether people have antibodies. And, you know, and some of the reasons for speculation around this is there's so many asymptomatic carriers. And in a sense, it's good. If a lot of people have experienced the disease and have the immunity, the disease has harder time growing exponentially. So this was a study they did in New York where they didn't go after sick people. They went to grocery stores and community centers, and they did, it's not quite a random sample, but it's closer to a random sample than what we're doing with the swabs and so forth. And this I thought was really interesting. So this is New York. If you look at New York City, they found that fully 20% of the people that they tested had the antibodies. But then you go to the North Country in New York, or you go out to the Finger Lakes, the numbers are very low. So the thought that there's a lot of immunity, yeah, in places, it seems, at least from this study, in places where, you know, there's a big concentration like New York, yes, that's so. But you can speculate as you might want to for Cape Cod, I'm not sure, but obviously, you know, our immunity rate is not, for instance, what it would be in Boston. And this is an interesting case study. You know, there's been a lot of talk about what will happen as it gets warmer and moister. You know, most viruses do worse under those circumstances, which is better for us. It is interesting, given that Florida, for instance, in terms of their policies around dealing with the crisis have been perhaps not as conservative as we have been, that Florida has not really exploded in terms of cases. Now, they've only tested about 2% of the population. They got 20 million people down there, but it still is interesting. So, I mean, maybe there is some hope that as it gets warmer and moister, which is something that does happen here, that, you know, the proliferation of the virus would reduce. And then finally, I wanted to close with an example of a reopening policy that's evolving at Washington State. Now, they haven't set the dates for these, but they've described a 4-phased approach. And Washington State's interesting because they started, you know, they kind of had case one. They started ahead of us in terms of the whole ramp for this thing. You can see in phase one, they're talking about, you know, essential businesses only, maybe letting construction, landscaping occur, car washes, and so forth. Phase two, they're talking about, you know, more businesses open, for instance, manufacturing. But for instance, one that's easy for us to understand is, for instance, restaurants, perhaps at 50% capacity, no table larger than 5 people. They get to phase 3 and they let the restaurants go to 75% capacity, no larger than 10. And then finally, phase 4, you can have a party at a nightclub. So they have not set dates for this, but they've described this policy. And I think that you'll see a phased approach coming out of the organization that the task force that Baker has put together. That may not exactly.
Gary, where are retail stores open?
That's a good question. Let's take a look at this. The retail, they're talking about curbside pickup only in phase 1. And
phase 2 is in store.
And phase 2, they're talking about in store, right?
Yeah, with restrictions, but
with
still.
restrictions. And then, they're probably looser. I mean, they're not describing every detail here, but looser in phase 3. But you can imagine, again, this is Washington State. This is not Massachusetts, so this is not us. But I imagine that I understand that task force is supposed to put our plan out for Massachusetts sometime before the 18th. And I would expect to see something similar. Anyway, that's what I have for now. So I'm going to stop this share so we can discuss.
Interesting.
That's great, Gary. Thank you so much. And so, Dan Maxwell, as someone who has been a fixture on Main Street in Falmouth and in retail for 37 years here, you've seen a lot of changes and a lot of adaptations in your time in business. The last few weeks, we've talked about a concept called the hammer and the dance. The hammer, of course, being the current strict social distancing and stay-at-home orders, and the more prolonged dance, really the variety of phases and activities in trying to get back to some semblance of the normal conduct of business. And really that's, I think, a chat that we'd love to have with you today. So as you look at that phased approach that we just talked about, what sorts of thoughts and plans are you making now to really adapt what's happening in the retail business?
First, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And I know that all of us at Maxwell and Company are extremely supportive and concerned for the street, and all of us are available to help any other merchants or to talk about this at any time. So please utilize any of the experience we have as much as you can. But some of the things that we are really thinking of doing or kicking around are just how we can protect our client and our staff at a 7-star in a 7-star way. We don't even want to be a 5-star hotel for this deal. We want to be a 7-star hotel. We want our staff and our clients to feel like we've protected them in every imaginable way. Some of those things actually, unfortunately, can coincide with embarrassing moments. Like if you want to take people's temperature before they walk in the store, how do you handle that? Are you going to really do that I think of some of the clients we've had for 30 years. You're going to go out and do that in the middle of the street or on the sidewalk in front of the store. So we've talked about actually maybe setting up a little station. We're now blessed with this little side area of the store back in the rear part of the store, where we might be able to actually have a little station where we could screen somebody and then allow them in. At a conference that we had the other day, we were talking with a lot of other merchants, and we even made the suggestion that maybe we need to have a couple of stations on the street. Possibly they could be run by retired nurses or whatever, where we could screen people as they come to the street in 3 or 4 places and give them a wristband for shopping for a period of time. The issue with that is that you still subjected yourself to what they may or may not have done somewhere else. So what we would like to do is make sure that we're doing the very best we can before someone actually enters our 4 walls. And I think to do that, even temperature taking doesn't tell the whole story. It's an effort toward understanding if somebody's maybe really sick, but it doesn't mean that they can't spread the virus, right, from what I understand. So, all these precautions are only a stab at making it better or protecting yourself as best you can. Certainly sanitizing people's hands as they walk in the store. In fact, I can probably tell you that from now on, as long as I own Maxwell and Company, we will probably require our staff to sanitize their hands every time they walk in the door of the store. And we probably should have been doing this for years, frankly, because that's the first simple thing that we can all do to make our environment safer. Because even if you took a great shower before you were home, whatever, by the time you stop at a Starbucks or a Dunkin' Donuts and then go to the bank on your way to work, you've exposed yourself to all kinds of germs. And we probably need to help ourselves even on a normal flu season. So we're going to implement some of these things for our staff for the long haul. And beyond that, we're going to make ourselves completely available to clients for video conferencing and delivering product to someone's doorstep and following up with them as needed. We've already done this with a couple clients in Boston, and this was in the earlier part of this before they did the complete shutdown. But as the scare started to happen, we set up the ability to video conference with people and shop around the store. We put together a box of things from that particular moment in selection, sent it to them, and then we followed up with visiting them with a staff member or a tailor to take care of them and to bring the things back so that they wouldn't be inconvenienced to have to ship product back to us. And that went very, very well for a little bit of time. And I would expect that might do really well again as we come out of this and there's some ability to do it without fear. I can say that all of this went completely quiet for us as we went into a complete stay-at-home situation. So, as far as in the store, we have concerns. When people try on clothing, what do you do with that clothing after they've tried it on?
Right.
And we're researching a couple of different things. There is some new technology that's actually even available for your personal walk-in closet, where you can buy a small, like sort of half refrigerator sized dry cleaning unit, and you can clean your own clothes in your closet. And these machines are in the $2,000 to $3,000 range as we understand it. What we don't understand scientifically yet is whether those machines will effectively destroy the virus, and we haven't experimented one to see what it actually does to clothing after you do it either. We know that we can steam clothing with hot steam, and we do have some good evidence with the people we've discussed this with that will be one way to sanitize. And so we already have that ability, and we have a full tailor shop at the store with additional steaming equipment. And so these are the things that we want to make sure that we're projecting to our client base and to our staff that we're going to be doing for them. And I want them to know that they can count on us doing it. In the early days of opening, we may actually just be private appointment for a period of time as we step ourselves back into this, even if we're told we can do otherwise, because we just want to take it to the best level we can. And we happen to have a business where we can do business on a private appointment basis and still do pretty well. That's not true for everyone. So
that's right. Well, we appreciate that really comprehensive look at how you're approaching the dance and really how you adapt your business. I'm going to come back to you in a minute, Dan, because I'd like both you and Bill Zammer to talk together about your collective experiences with the Paycheck Protection Program, because I think some of the feedback that both of you have had is really important for our legislators to hear about some of the challenges with that. But first, I would like Bill Hough to just have you share your perspective. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, you have really a dual role in this pandemic, and both covering it as a local news organization, but also trying to understand how best you can adapt as the owner of a small business. And so talk to us a little bit about that challenging dichotomy that you're living every day.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's a dichotomy, but first of all, it's, we think about the day to day and how do we gather the news and how do we put it together at the end of the week, or actually all the time on the website. And it's been very, very interesting because we are basically all of us are working from home. And so going back I can't remember when we all decided that we were going to disband and work from home, but when we did, we were all very nervous about would we be able to communicate effectively. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts. We have 4 papers, we have 8 reporters, editors, we have sales reps, and but thanks to technology, it's gone very, very well. I mean, we use Slack for interoffice messaging. We have some text, some call, and of course email. And it's actually gone very well. So it's almost seamless. I don't know how many people even know that on a daily basis there's never more than 4 or 5 people in that office. The most we have is on Thursday when we have to put the paper together. It's a little easier when you can actually see what we call dummies, but the pages laid out before they send off to the printery. So I think that part of it's gone quite well. Now the business side of it's a whole nother story. It's quite frankly it's terrifying. But we're following the folks like Dan. When they can open up, then that will help us. But first of all, I've got to say I'm incredibly grateful to all the businesses that have stuck with us and kept their trust in us. And so we're not dead in the water. We are losing a lot of money every week. That seems to be improving. Our sales staff have had to think outside the box and help market people in different ways. And I think a lot of our local merchants have stepped up and are supporting us in ways that they wouldn't be a little bit more generous with us than they would have, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. But we're still it's still a struggle, and should we get into the payroll protection program? That we got the grant, we got a loan. We're hoping it'll be largely grant.
And then Dan and Bill can join in.
Yeah. But just as our challenges are a little different. But we got the loan, and I went out to hire people back. The first guy had a job already, so he won't be coming back. The next person was getting so much money in unemployment and the $600 a week that I had a hard time. I got him back for some time, but it's hard to say, oh, hey, take a $600 a week pay cut and come work for me, especially when we're getting by on fewer bodies. Now we're starting to bring people back, and that's good. But what do I do June 30th when I got to bring everybody back? What do I do with 2 sports writers when there's no sports? So this is, I got some time to think about it and figure this out, but those are the challenges there.
Bill, I've got when a little while I've got some stuff. I got some answers for your questions as to how to deal with that, but I'll get to it.
Okay.
I think that's a challenge that people are feeling, and Dan Maxwell and I had a chance to chat yesterday and prepare for today's show a little bit, and we talked about a similar issue related to the PPP, and that is because there's that finite window in where you have to spend the money to get it to convert from a loan to a grant. The lack of flexibility in that period is a real challenge, particularly for business owners around this virtual table who own businesses that are largely seasonal. I mean, even a local newspaper obviously provides the news 52 weeks a year, but the businesses that can advertise are more robust in the summer months. And so I'll throw this out there for anyone, including you, Michael, from the Chamber's perspective, but what advice would you give to Bill Keating, who's been a guest on the show a couple of times, and his colleagues about work that they can do with the PPP and its next iterations to make it more responsive to seasonal business owners?
Well, I think last time we talked about it, on the air, we spoke to him. I had a couple of issues with the PPP. One was that that timeline needs to change. Congress needs to amend that timeline for seasonal businesses so that people have the opportunity that is not that strict 8-week window of opportunity when people, they need that money in June or maybe beyond, based on Gary's example of what Washington is doing. So that's a moving target, and Congress needs to amend that. And the other thing is to also, from a very selfish perspective too, Bill, we're in the same position as you, Bill Hough. The chamber is a business. We don't get a percentage of revenues or grants or anything. I mean, we have 600 members, and we rely on our members to pay dues to run. We're running a small business as well, and 501c6s, chambers of commerce that are on the front line. That we're working harder than ever getting this information. We were exempt. We couldn't even apply for the PPP. But 501c3s, which God bless them, they should, and 501c19s, veterans organizations were able to. So we have been pleading. I know that Wendy Northcross at the Cape Cod Chamber, the other chambers together collectively have been pleading with our legislators to let chambers get involved because the work is more important than ever. But, I think they really need to rethink, again, like we've said in the past, SBA, $50 billion a year. Right now, all of a sudden, they were supposed to get $350 billion out in 2 weeks. They did the best they could, but they can't. They can go back and amend that and give people a break, because it will be a crying shame if restaurateurs and seasonal businesses are on the hook for a loan for money that is going to be useless to them in June or July. They need that money when they're up and running. And I think there's probably enough people thinking that through and talking to our congressional leaders where they're going to hopefully make some changes.
Well, I haven't seen every show that you guys have put on, so I didn't see Bill's earlier ones. But obviously, or maybe not obvious, it seems obvious to me, they picked June 30th. They figured everything was going to be opened up by June 30th and everyone's going to be fine.
Yeah,
so with Hope,
no, that's not the case.
Yeah, with Hope, they'll go back and revisit that timeline. I don't know.
I know Bill Zammer's had a lot. Bill Zammer's done a lot of research on this and has a lot of thoughts on it.
There's a lot of this. Thanks, Mike. There's a lot of discussion as to the date, and they are looking at it. But the important thing right now, and I've got a website in a few moments that I'll give you, that are from the SBA. There's 15 pages of frequently asked questions, and in particular, your question, Bill, about the bringing them back on June 30th. If that employee, if you give that employee written notice that you want him back, and they refuse to come back, got to be documented. Then they're going to forgive that person coming back. So those two people you're talking about, if they don't come back to work, for whatever reason, you document that fact, they're going to count that. Again, they say, the SBA says they're going to count it in. So when you see this website, you need to go to it and download all this information. But I do believe at this point that they're going to give forgiveness on that part of it. The question, of course, of when the 8 weeks begins, the 8 weeks begins when the money hits your bank account. For example, right now, I'm paying my employees who are sitting home because I'm not open yet. And I'm paying to be home. But in order to keep myself whole, I actually added more money to some of their monies in order to make sure they weren't dropping off, so they stayed on the payroll, because I do need them all back on June 30th. When June 30th comes about, I'll have people on that payroll, believe me. Mike Kasparian may be on my payroll at that point. Prove otherwise. And I've talked to the bank, and again, they are very, very questionable about what the criteria is for forgiveness. They don't know yet, really and truly. And they have 60 days to respond as to whether they're going to forgive your loan. My belief, and again, it's my feeling, that they're going to be very, very lax on allowing you to go forward. They're not going to come down with the hammer on you. So I think you can get away with having those employees by giving the documentation. But the whole thing revolves around documentation of everything you do, keeping track of the money you're spending. I mean, the money hits your bank account, you're paying people, keep track of it now. But June 3rd, that target date, you need to bring those employees back. And you have two different times, Bill. You have the period of January, in my case, January 1st of last year and January 29th or 28th of last year. And of course, this year, the same period. So I don't know which two periods they want to compare to. You may be able to choose between which period. If you had 15 employees back then and you bring 15 employees back in June, you're going to be okay. And again, they don't know, as long as you're spending that money during this open period. As I said, I've added additional money to the people, to my employees, to make sure I have the money being spent. As long as you've got those names on that payroll on June 30th, I think you're going to be okay. You get 15 employees there, you got 15 employees there, you've done what they've asked you to do. And remember, this money is not some new money. The money you're getting from this, some people are thinking, oh, it's a great windfall in a sense. But the money you're getting would be, you're supplanting unemployment money. If they weren't giving you this PPP money to keep the employees on the payroll, they'd be getting unemployment. Both are federal programs, so it's the same dollars. And people don't realize that there's no great. This is not draining the treasury doing this, by the way. It's one or the other.
On top of that, Bill, in my position, if I did not get that loan, I would have done a second round of layoffs. I mean, I would have had to severely cut staff in order to stay alive.
Exactly. So this is one.
It is working to that extent.
Yeah, it is. The difficulty, of course, is you're paying people to sit home right now, and I'm not open. That kills me. But what are you going to do? Nothing.
But in our case, the issue for me is not so much even just the seasonal aspect, but just the fact that we're just not open and we can't be productive at all with the payroll. The only smart thing for us to ultimately do was lay everyone off and stop the bleeding and protect any cash reserves that we had so that we had money to go back into business later. And we have everyone on page with that. The issue, as Bill's already expressed, is that every single one of those employees is making more money with the $600 than they were working for us. And that's great. I'm glad for them. It's actually made me feel better that our employees are well taken care of. Thank God that we're in Massachusetts, because it's not like that in Florida and other places. I can't even believe the amount of unemployment benefit everyone's getting. It's fantastic.
Are you paying now?
I'm sorry?
Are you paying employees now?
No, I'm not. Every single person is on unemployment, but I have been funded just in the last couple of days for the PPP. And quite frankly, I'm frustrated because I want to utilize it wisely and I'm not sure what to do. And I can't get the same answer out of 3 people. And I'm talking really good people, like my accountant, my banker, everyone has a different view or a different answer on this. And it's a simple answer to me. If they would just make this money, the clock start ticking on the review on the day that the state governor in the state that you got the money allows you to be reopened.
Good answer.
Because then I can use the money to ramp back up. Our employees are already taken care of by unemployment very nicely. And I understand that I can pay them this way and get them off unemployment. But as you say, Mr. Zamber, that's just a trade-off. And at the end of the day, I end up with the loan gone. And either it's forgiven because I do all the right stuff and my employees make less money, or it's not forgiven if I just sit on it and utilize it the way that I wisely feel like the money should be used. And that's very frustrating.
I know. Remember, we're part of 50 states. So the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you get half, an unemployment, you receive half of what you earned. So if you're $800 a week, you're going to get $400 a week. If you're in Louisiana, even if you're making $800 a week, you're going to get $200 a week.
Right.
That's where the issue lies. Nothing they can do about it. So will they come back and trade it? I don't know. One of the things is a pro rata portion of what they're going to do. But the problem with that is they keep talking about the 75% you have to spend before you get the proration. And I don't know how I really honestly don't know how that's going to work.
I don't either.
The only reason I took the loan down myself was because the other 25% helps pay for, other, healthcare and some other issues, rent and all that.
Yeah, I get that part, but it's hard. It is hard to ask our employees to come back to work. Actually, to not even come back to work because I can't even have them come to the store safely because they're told right now to stay at home.
Right.
And we don't really have a business that we can work from home. We can't work from home. There's nothing we can do at this point. We've done the bookkeeping. We're so caught up. It's fantastic. I can open the store in 1 minute when we're ready. We're ready to roll. Store is beautifully merchandised, full of goods. That's a whole nother conversation, by the way. But we're ready to roll. But the first thing that I want to do in this deal is take care of the people who have been dedicated to us in some cases for 35 years, 36 years. People have worked for us. I have one lady who works for us now for 37 years this summer.
Wow.
I'm going to take care of them best first. And to do that, they're in the best place they can be right now, collecting the $600 plus the unemployment.
Right.
And then I desperately need this money to get everyone off of unemployment and to ramp back up to business so that I do have 6 to 8 weeks of some funding to get things going again. Because just getting to be open doesn't mean anything to me. I need to see business. I don't know what that's going to be.
the general public needs to understand this is not a windfall for employers, and that the
No.
politics got involved, and not a darn thing we're going to do about it now, but see what happens in a couple of months, and just hopefully on June 30th you can bring the people back. But again, you're going to download this website I'm going to send you. It's got 15 pages of questions and answers that may help you out with some you're looking at. It's SBA.
We are bringing them back the second we start paying them, are we not? I mean, that's what that is. You brought
Well,
them
and
back
that's
and
really
paid.
the challenge, and that's why I think this dialogue is so valuable, not only to obviously the six of us, but to the many people who watch it every week, because I think this is the sort of feedback that our decision makers, particularly those in Congress, need to hear. These real examples of small business owners who are struggling to meet the limited scope of how you use this money. Gary, I think this is a good segue. Could you put Bill's slides back up? And I think Bill Zamra, you can walk us through some of the homework you did since last week.
Okay. First of all, just so you know, the Restaurant Association, as well as I'm sure the Retailers Association, we're going to put out a poster in the front of it, much to say what you're saying, Dan, in the front of the store or the restaurant, saying, here's our promises to you as to how we are going to comply with the regulations to keep you safe, and then ask our customers to also promise back to us that they're in fact safe. So there's a poster that I'm showing here that you should take a look at. It's really fascinating, and we're going to have that. I know the Restaurant Association is going to do it. I think and I understand the Retailer Association will do the same thing. But basically, there's another problem with this, and I think you got to be careful because they're fighting about this now. Is the litigation that's going to take place over people getting ill or getting injured in some way, shape, or form by getting COVID by going to your store, or an employee may want to sue you. But that's a raging dialogue right now. We talked about it weeks ago, and now they're talking about it in Congress right this moment. So that's one issue. And then the next one, Gary, is the as you prepare to open, there's some websites. One is the Restaurant Association website, which has a lot of information. More importantly for retailers is the next two. One is the Food and Drug Administration's guidelines for opening as to what you should be doing in your stores and in your places of business. The third one is really important. That's the one Bill Hough I was just talking about, is the forgiveness rules, and that's an SBA paycheck protection program. They frequently ask questions, and there really are good answers in there as to various problems that people are going to face. So I really suggest that those you download those websites. Again, when we open up, we're preparing now to open, and I'm over in the harbor. You can take that down here. You can leave it, but it's up to you. And again, I'm finding, what am I going to do? I'm so confused because whether I open, I'm going to have tables all over the parking lot, I'm going to just fill the harbor with tables and chairs. I don't know if I'm just going to hand people a bag when they come in with their food. I don't know how I distance people or have everyone walking around with gloves, and because gloves are ridiculous. I don't know if you realize gloves are the world's worst thing, because the gloves are more unsanitary than your hands. I'd rather have them washing their hands. But face masks and people interfacing with each other. How do I do, people at the front door? Do I have to have reservations? How are they going to walk through to get to the table? So these issues are facing us. And then the bigger issue, which people don't always understand, is this is throughout the Cape. There are 5,000 people who normally come to Cape Cod from Jamaica and other places to work in the summer. Believe it or not, I don't have enough employees to open a restaurant. I normally have, I think I have 100 pretty much full-time employees. But when I'm in the season, I'm over 200 employees. I don't have them. And my question is, if I do open, and I open with a smaller group of people, my service level is going to be way down, and whether I can open 7 days a week becomes an issue. And not only me, but every restaurant or hotel, and a lot of retail shops on the Cape are going to have problems getting employees. So now here goes catch-22. Great, there are a lot of unemployed people in the world, but as you point out, Bill or Dan, they're making $600 a week till the end of July on unemployment. They don't want to come to work yet. So half the summer's over, and I'm now walking into August. Now I got to find employees, because the H-2B employees and the J-1s aren't coming. So now what do I do? It's frustrating as hell, because I want to hire folks locally, but they're not going to want to come out of unemployment. The
So
sad
there you have it. There are obviously no easy answers at all, but I think as long as we continue to try to focus on the solution and find answers, at least locally, all of us will be better off. Michael Kasparian is the president of the chamber. I know you're inundated every day with dozens of suggestions, potential answers to some of these challenges that your members are facing. Talk to us a little bit about that challenge in terms of trying to respond to lots of well-intentioned ideas, but having limited time to implement them. But also, and probably more importantly, we talk on this show about focusing on the solution, and again, how will we? And you and your team at the chamber have partnered with the EDIC, the Economic Development and Industrial Corporation here in town, to provide an additional safety net for our small businesses, and really fulfilling your mission to be a source of support for all businesses, from restaurants to retailers to our industrial folks. So talk to us a little bit about that small business loan fund that you and the EDIC are working on, and also some of the other challenges you're facing every day.
So, yeah, the loan fund came together as really a call to action. We were inundated with emails and telephone calls, not just from business owners, but from people in the community primarily, who said, what is the town doing for our business owners that are struggling? What is the town doing? And in the beginning, we put a lot of our energy in helping to direct our member businesses, and all businesses. At this point, we're working with any business, whether they're a member of the chamber or not, in trying to get them lined up and give them support with the PPP. But as Dan and Bill Hough have alluded to, there are a lot of challenges with the PPP. And a lot of people got left behind on that PPP. They didn't get the money. They were late to start. They were confused. They didn't apply. A lot of different reasons. And then, we were approached by the Falmouth EDIC, Michael Galasso, Mike DeJohn, who's the executive director, and attorney Megan English Braga, the chair of the select board, coming together saying, well, what can we do together? And we were able to put together a program. And we get together with a couple of community banks, and we're in the process of putting together a $2 million fund from which we're going to make very low interest loans to those businesses. It won't be a PPP. It won't be a replacement for the PPP, but it'll be a way to get $30,000 to $50,000 loans to some of these small businesses that really need that cash infusion. And this isn't a grant program. I mean, these companies, these businesses are going to have to still go through an underwriting process by a local community bank. But that money will be guaranteed. The Falmouth EDIC will be acting as the guarantor, just like the SBA is acting as the guarantor for the government loans. So it's a response to that call to action, and something that, it's real dollars that can be used. We've gotten calls from people. People are very well intentioned. There's a lot of great ideas out there. But, we only have so much time and so many resources. People are giving ideas and maybe collecting people's extra change, which is a great idea, and maybe doing a fund. But we really kind of went to work trying to make an impact. And our hope is going to be that we're going to be able to lend that money responsibly. And it's going to be a revolving fund. The idea is that this will become a revolving fund that, I lend the money to Bill Zammer, and it helps him get off the ground, and he's able to pay the money back. Well, then that goes back in the kitty. And if there's another disaster, a hurricane or something else down the road, that money's available. I mean, it's not going to solve everybody's problems, but it's $2 million more than wasn't there. And it might save some of our neighbors from going out of business. Falmouth is a very unique community with 2 degrees of separation. I talk to other chamber executives across the Cape, every day we're talking, and, the communities are coming together, and people here are saying, these are my neighbors that own these businesses. These are my neighbors that work in these businesses. What's the community doing to make that happen? And, I'm very proud of the fact that the EDIC and the select board and these local community banks came together and said, yes, how can we make this work? So it's very gratifying to know that we're part of that solution.
Excellent. And the focus on community is something that I talk about in my column quite a bit. And Bill Hough, I'll throw that concept to you. Bill Zammer and I were chatting yesterday about getting ready for today's show. And we talked about the fact that despite what's happening in the news industry throughout the United States and worldwide, really, people still thirst for local news and want to feel that sense of connection with their local community. So despite the challenges of actually running the small business you run, I think the service you're providing is still critically necessary, and I know that people really appreciate it. Are you feeling that? I mean, are you getting that sort of feedback about people's connection to the community through the news stories that you provide?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have for quite a number of years gotten comments like, "We're so glad you do what you do," but it's ramped up exponentially. The other thing is I wanted to have my web guy here because he could give real numbers. Our subscribership is up, and our web activity is way, way up. I mean, just off the charts up.
Excellent.
So people are, they're using this information. You may have noticed that we put all the website is for subscribers only generally, but we put all the virus news up front so anyone can go and read it. So we can see it. There's a tremendous amount of activity.
Bill, it's really interesting. I congratulate you doing a great job. I mean, for businesses to be able, in order to even advertise with you is very important, because the other end of the Cape, you can't do that because that other little rag down there doesn't do a good job as much as you do. And I'm really happy that you're there. But Troy and I were talking yesterday, maybe you guys would like to comment on what we think of, and again, it's going to be a tough summer, and on a brighter side, there's got to be a bright side to say, okay, we know right now, I've told my managers, minimize the losses, preserve capital, do what you can do to get through this period of time, because, hopefully the fall is going to, the summer is going to be a tough time. What do you envision now, the world changing in Falmouth? What's it going to look like in your mind by the end of this summer, let's say, when this thing's kind of about the Passover portion, all of a sudden we've done the bad part. What do you see it look like in Falmouth? Dan, you might want to answer it, Bill.
I personally am incredibly optimistic, and one of the frustrating things for us is we've had, when all this started to happen, and this maybe wasn't the best health thing, but a lot of our clients that have second homes all came to the Cape 6 weeks ago.
Yes.
And they've been there this whole time, and we haven't been able to do business with them. I mean, our staff, we have a Zoom meeting once a week with our staff, and we have reports from people getting to go out for a walk or whatever, and they're running into our summer clients everywhere. And those clients are reaching out to us in many nice ways. We personally made the decision that we just didn't want to try and sell product to people over this time. So maybe we're remiss, but we just decided it was a time to sort of hug our customers, send out nice campaigns that said, how much we are thinking of them and praying for them, and how much we wish them well. And we're there for people. We've made it available. Somebody needs something, to take care of them in every imaginable way. But I just haven't been sending promotion campaigns out. And we just decided we needed to go quiet and let this thing kind of play itself out. And we have planned for a lot of advertising and marketing to start ramping back up, and we're ready to go with it. I haven't wanted to waste it because I feel like I can burn through some really good ideas, and it takes a lot of time to put these things together. And I feel like we can kind of burn through some of this advertising, and I'm talking more, not so much newspaper advertising at the moment, but just the email kind of campaigns that we send out to thousands of people all the time. And we're sitting on 2 months worth of Instagram planning that's ready to go. And we're sitting on 2 months worth of campaigns already made, photography done. We're ready. But I don't want to do it until I feel like it can start to have some positive productivity and be able to be responded. The couple of things we've sent out to, I've never had so many emails come back to me about them.
Right.
And I've had clients just wanting to talk on email after I send something out. I mean, they're sending me articles, they're reading. I mean, we're having these fantastic conversations and relationship things with our clients, which is great, but it's not selling merchandise and paying for anyone's payroll. And so for us, we just wanted to be really ready to go.
What are you
And
gonna do
we've
with
been
those
waiting
bottoms,
for the moment.
Dan? What are you gonna do with all those bottoms you can't sell?
Well,
Tops, no bottoms.
that's been a problem for 36 years. So that's we're a crazy business, even when it's working. So there you go. But we, you know, I'm positive, man. I think that people are dying to get back to normal life, and they're going to be supportive. And we're blessed with an amazing group of people that we've worked. This will be our 37th summer, so we worked very hard to develop those relationships. And you know, they're not just going to go away. There's going to be some people who are going to go away because they've just been hurt, and that's going to happen. But I've already seen some. I mean, believe me, we're in the United States of America, and I know there's patriots, and they've already shown face to us, and that happened in 9/11 and other tough moments in life. There are people
who are an optimist. I'm glad to hear somebody's optimistic. Thank goodness.
Well, you know, it's good, Bill. It's nice to have another optimist on the program today. I love it.
I got the Chamber of Commerce.
Well, you know, Dan's 100% correct. You know, we're also working on the messaging and trying to get it in the can. We're not ready to come out yet, but at some point we have to think about, you know, what it's like, and it's a very careful line that you draw. Now, like to Dan's point, and what we've been saying all along, we've already got all those second homeowners who own homes here, pay taxes here, who are going to come here. And at the very least, that's going to, you know, a little more than double the population of the folks who are here. And those people are going to be supportive of local businesses, and they're going to help our businesses survive. And I think that most businesses are doing what Dan's doing. They're taking care of their clientele. They're not trying to sell anything. They're trying to be responsible, and they're going to be prepared, and they're going to be ready when the time is right. You know, the tourism is a whole different other industry, another issue. You know, as you know, the selectmen canceled all events through the end of the year, through the end of the season, that is August 31st. Very, very tough call. But, you know, I know a lot of people, we've received a lot of calls on the chamber with that, regarding that. But I think what people need to understand is that, you know, the door is left open. The health agent, Scott McGann, had spoken about, you know, if there is an event later in the season and things get better, the event can be considered with a specific plan to reopen. So, you know, it's a measured approach, one step at a time. Health and safety come first. People are going to come. People are going to be here in a slow and responsible manner. And I'm not, Bill, I'm not saying we're going to have the same summer we had last year, but, you know, I'm optimistic that, you know, we're going to be okay. We're going to come out of this. I think the fall shoulder season is going to be strong, barring any, you know, reinfection. But you have to have hope, right? And
now, Michael, the scene that you have behind the scene that you have behind you, that is behind you, is the dream that brings people to the Cape.
Yep.
And that is not going to go away. People are not going to quit dreaming about being where you guys are sitting. Those views, that's what this is. And
look at Bill is.
All of our advertising, our approach and our advertising at the store has always been to sell the dream of being there, because when they're there, they support the good places. And we have to believe that after thousands of years of a beautiful Cape Cod, that it's not going to go away because of this.
Bill,
this is going to be
what are
a
your
tough
thoughts?
moment. We're going to have to do the right things. It's going to be a tough moment, but that is not going to change. And we have to hold on to that. And we have an incredible place that we live. It's very, very special. And in these times, where did people run to? They came. They wanted to come where we are. And I get that. I mean, it maybe was a tough health thing for us that so many people showed up. But at the end of the day, that's also going to be the saving grace.
No question. And Bill Hough, I think you've seen that yourself with, you know, we're in the midst of the worst pandemic of our lifetimes, but there is good news out there. And so what we're talking about is the realism of the impacts of this, but also some of the hope that we've heard in this circle and some of the good news that's out there. And I know that's been a challenge for you to accurately and objectively report the impact of this pandemic on our lives, but also search for some of the good news. And in this community in particular, we always seem to be able to find it because, as Michael was saying before, you know, in this community, people always fill those gaps and address those needs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I go back and forth from being an optimist to being a pessimist, I suppose. And I thought for some time that there'd be a rebound effect, that when this is over, that people will be so happy. It'll be like the winter of 2015, if you recall. We had like 3 feet of snow. We had a great summer. And I think that was partly because people are so pent up. They really had this energy they wanted to expend. And then I get a little pessimistic. I think, well, this is going to go on a little longer. And so it's going to be a tough year. But through all that, we learned a lot. I mean, I learned a lot about my business. I've been pushed in ways I've never been pushed before. And that's a good thing. And as you were alluding to, Troy, I mean, that there have been a lot of really good things in the community. I mean, the good of people has just come out all over the place.
These guys call me the pessimist, but I'll give you some very optimistic kinds of things.
Nice.
My view of the new Falmouth and the new Cape Cod is very different. I think of major changes. All these, I've talked to a number of real estate people, for example. People are escaping the city, New York City, et cetera. Those second homeowners, Mike, they are going to be first homeowners. They're going to work from home down here. They discovered exactly what we're doing now, the Zooms. You can Zoom anywhere you go. I talked to some bankers today. They're doing all their meetings by Zoom. So they're working from home, but home is here because this is, like you said, that background is what you want to be. So they're not going to be, they're going to be first homeowners. So you're going to see a rise, whether it's good or bad, you're going to see a rise in population of people living here now who are working. And that's going to have an impact on what we do. And, you know, Dan, one of the things that it's awful to say this, but there's a thing called survival of the fittest. And we're the most over-retailed space in the country, from what I understand. There are more retail stores per person than anywhere, and it pretty well holds true with restaurants. Okay, we're going to have a culling out, and I think that may be good in one respect, so the ones that are left are able to earn a living, not having to depend so much on the seasonal aspects of things, and finally come down to a reasonable kind of economy, because it's very difficult to continually do this stuff with getting H-2B employees in and all that. It's very expensive, and maybe that's going to end, and we'll be able to actually have young people who can live here and actually afford houses and make this more prosperous versus the seasonal economy we've been. So I think on a bright side, I think that's a real positive. So see what happens.
Yeah, I can't disagree with some of that, or all of that really, in many ways. And I have to say that, you know, this is a different conversation, but there's going to be a falling out of this at the wholesale level. That, I mean, our inventory situation is something we don't even have time to discuss in this group discussion, because that is I mean, I've been sitting closed with an entire season full of inventory, merchandise displayed beautifully and ready to go. So you guys can only imagine where that lands. But that's something that we're going to be working with vendors from all over the world on, and we're seeing that cooperation already. But you're absolutely right. This is going to change retail in many, many ways, and it already is beginning. And it's going to be a process that's going to be difficult. But I think in the end, possibly better, because retail had gotten to a place of being very challenging anyway. And so I believe that this could have some positive effect on that. And I'll just say this as a business person. You know, I opened a store at 24 years old, 37 years ago, and I did it with a small loan from my parents. I came from nothing, and the town of Falmouth and Cape Cod and Massachusetts and being in this country, I mean, it's been an incredible journey. And I look at this another way too. I'm getting to be a businessman in an epic moment, and we are going to go through maybe one of the toughest, most epic times that you could ever be a retailer. And there's something about that challenges me as well. And I'm in. Let's do this.
Okay.
I would encourage anyone that's watching this or that wants to have the discussion that, this isn't about what someone else can do for you. This is about you being creative and working hard, working through it, making tough decisions, and being creativity will win all here. And I really, really am optimistic that we're going to come out the other side of this thing with some positive things, but we do need some financial help, and we need smart people who are going to be wise in the way they help us. And the way this PPP thing has been done, on the one hand, it's been amazing that we can come up with this kind of money and distribute it the way that we have. But there has to be a better way of examining it and using it. So the process isn't over just because we figured out how to get it to everybody. And I know that a lot of people haven't gotten it, by the way, but we got to do better.
Amen. Well, that I'll tell you that the sort of innovation and challenge, Bill Hough talked about it, that he has been challenged in ways he's never been challenged before. That is, I think, really the positive side of what we've seen here, and business people's ability to adapt to that. I mean, adaptation and innovation, is what Gary has lived for decades in the tech industry. So it's great to see that sort of optimism, and Dan, your gratitude that you express to this community is phenomenal, and it's well founded. I agree. And one of the aspects of that, you see the backgrounds behind us starting to change, is one of the outgrowths of this show. We call it Falmouth Cares. And several weeks ago, Gary and some of his colleagues came up with the logo that you see behind us. And we had a thought and an idea to use the positive momentum on this show to be an additional benefit to the community, other than just folks sitting around a table and having a conversation. And so we've been able to do that. And as our newspaper publisher is so beautifully modeling for us.
Oh, wait. No.
Outstanding.
Bill Hough is our model. Oh, look at turn around, Bill, so we can see.
So
No,
due to
I'll
the
knock my
generosity
computer over.
of Bill Zammer and his wife Linda, and Sam and Judy LaRusso, we've actually printed 1,000 of those T-shirts. And to date, really through word of mouth and social media alone, we've sold more than 600 T-shirts, and to date raised over $9,000 to benefit the Falmouth Service Center and Belonging to Each Other, a local homeless prevention nonprofit. And those sales will continue.
Dan, we need some more banners out there. You wouldn't help out?
Yes, indeed. We'll be putting more banners out, and Bill Zammer mentioned the Flying Bridge will be open this weekend. They're opening, and so we'll have a tent outside for a few hours on Saturday where we will, at a safe social distance, have T-shirts available to purchase. Right now, they're only available on the Belonging to Each Other website at bteofalmouth.com, but we will be live and in person and selling those T-shirts at Falmouth Harbor this weekend, so you can support those local charities and demonstrate that Falmouth truly does care. And I know, Bill Hough, you're not only wearing the T-shirt, but have been a great help to us in spreading the word about this fantastic way to show that we're all in this together. And it's not just about raising money for local charities, but it's those hundreds of people wearing those T-shirts and demonstrating that we have solidarity and we're all in this together.
Absolutely.
That didn't work.
Now, Troy, I had heard something about Bill Zammer providing onion rings at that table this Saturday.
How tall a thing of onion rings is what I want.
Well, you're going to have to come by and see. So this has been a fantastic opportunity, I think, to have just a wonderful dialogue. And Dan and Bill, we especially thank you and hope you'll come back. As long as the need is there, we'll continue to have this dialogue. And so you've both been great contributors in sharing your experiences and your perspectives. And we're getting very positive feedback, and it's because of the experience that people share on the show that I think we're getting that feedback. Dan or Bill, anything to add as we close out another show?
No, but thank you for having me, Troy. I appreciate it very much.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thanks for all the work you
much.
continue to do. And
Thank
Dan,
you very much for having me. Thank you for having me as well, and thanks for all the effort that you put into doing these things. I hope that can be helpful for people. And
Yes.
again, if you can if you need to send anyone my way to have a discussion, our staff and whatever experience we can lend, it'd be our privilege. Thank you.
Buy T-shirts.
Buy t-shirts.
Okay.
Right. Buy T-shirts. All right. Well,
It's
for our wonderful panel of Bill Zammer, Gary Bacon, and Michael Kaspari, and I'm your host, Troy Clarkson, and we really are grateful that you've joined us for another one of these shows, and continue to watch the shows and buy the T-shirts to demonstrate that Falmouth cares. Stay safe, and we'll see you again next week.
The Falmouth bells were tolling, and our hearts sang on. Was it the spell of our town, or an April dawn? Who knows if we shall meet again? But when the morning chimes ring sweet again, I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way.